and then we got to see. We're going live now.
Yay.
All right.
You want that mic on?
Yeah. How's our shot look? Howdy, everybody, if you're already there. Don't know what we've got here. Could be on my private page, could be on the public page. It does not appear. Yes, we are. We are live on the main page. Everything's working. How about that camera shot? What do y'all think? Doesn't this look much better? We're testing out a much better camera for tonight. Howdy, everybody. Oh, it's not on my headphones. Here, let me take those off. Sounds like the audio is pretty good. Could be on. Okay. Anyway, we're using some new equipment that we plan to use in Georgia this weekend for our barnstorming tour, because we're going to live stream a couple of events to you. So you are the test case, whoever's dialing in today, but also an opportunity for me to catch up on a lot of stuff that happened this week before we head to Georgia. Because once we get to Georgia, obviously I'm not going to be on the front porch, so I can't do a front porch live. And even Sunday night, we're going to be doing one of these big events in Georgia. And so we plan to stream that event for our regular Front Porch Live. So hoping that you'll get a chance to enjoy that. We're going to have a great time with those events. It's going to be just phenomenal opportunity to spread biblical citizenship across Georgia and get more folks involved and doing their job to be good biblical citizens. So I'm going to just run down a few things to catch up on, see if I can get it all pulled up here, and make sure my guys are happy with audio.
I think we're set.
Lighting's good. It looks a little dark on mine. Is it dark?
I can
What do you think?
Everybody's saying sound is a little low.
Sound is low. Let's see.
We're waiting.
Yeah. And you're definitely getting it from, let me tap on this. You guys hear a tap right there when I do that, I bet? Thank you guys for being our guinea pigs as we get ready for these events this weekend. By the way, fantastic events this weekend. David and Tim Barton and myself are going to do essentially Wall Builders Live radio, but in person. So we're going to be in person in Georgia for 5 or 6, actually a total of, 7 events across Georgia. Super excited about that. Thank you to Tracy Dean for helping us to make this happen, for others that have been willing to help, for just all of the folks that have chipped in to participate or donate or whatever you've done to help us make this happen. It's hopefully gonna have an impact on what happens in Georgia. And of course, I am going to take full credit for the fact that the president's going to Georgia. He's following us there. That's actually what's happening here. He found out that we were going to Georgia, and he figured, hey, Wall Builders Live is doing Georgia, I better do Georgia. So everybody, you're welcome for getting the president out to Georgia. Okay, we had absolutely nothing to do with it, in truth. But thankfully, his event on Saturday is in a totally different part of the state, not even close to where our event is. Otherwise, no one would have come to our event. If you had a choice of going to a Trump rally or coming to see me speak on stage, don't even lie in the comments to try to make me feel good. You should go to the Trump rally. That's what I would have done if I had the choice. In fact, I would have left my own event to go to the Trump event. Anyway, all right, Rhett, if you're happy with everything, I'm going to dive into the content. Okay.
Great.
All right, let's start with Georgia. Oh, my goodness. What in the world is happening in Georgia? I know I said Georgia barnstorming. I'm talking about the Georgia recount and the fraud that is being uncovered. I'm just going to read a list to you. This is from testimony. They're in the hearings. They're having hearings today in Georgia. This is just from a few minutes ago, or a couple hours ago, I guess. So 2,056 felons illegally voted in Georgia. 66,000 under 18 voted in Georgia. 2,423 weren't registered at all. 1,043 used a post office box. 4,926 voted past the registration date. 10,315 died before the election but managed to vote. 395 voted in 2 states. 15,700 moved out of state. 40,279 changed county and didn't re-register to vote, meaning they changed county. And I heard this one live. They changed their county residents prior to the deadline, the 30-day deadline, which is fine, but then you have to vote in the new county. You can't go back and vote in the old county. Anyway, I have not investigated these reports myself, but this is what's coming out in testimony today in Georgia. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all the fraud stuff. I'll just say this, that the hearings are revealing the widespread fraud that Stephanopoulos and all the others were saying. Where's the widespread fraud? Well, it's happening, okay? They're proving it in state after state after state. Now, whether or not it's enough to overturn the election, I think some of the initial reports of how much is there clearly could overturn the election. But I just don't think that is the most important part of this whole thing. I know that's what gets more headlines. I know that's what most people are kind of hanging their hat on, that you turn this by proving the fraud, but I still disagree with that. I think the most important thing that will turn this back to Trump is the fact that these states broke the law with their voting schemes. That is what has yet to be litigated at the U.S. Supreme Court fully. We have the initial rulings, one before the election that was 5-4 that allowed it to go forward because Roberts wouldn't do an injunction, and then later Alito required them to keep the votes, and we still haven't had that back at the U.S. Supreme Court. I think we're going to win that, and I think that's going to throw out Pennsylvania. So let me just try to summarize this real quick. There are three paths that remain for Donald Trump and for this election to potentially switch from Biden to Trump, or actually to prove that Trump won the election. And we're not going to spend any time on, you guys know, I've said it many times here on the Front Porch Live. I think the election, without question, was a massive victory for Donald Trump. I think there's definitely monkey business going on in many of these states, not just the ones that are still in play. And the problem is proving it, okay? But the ones that are still at play. So let's look at path number one, okay? Path number one, which I think is would make the most sense, would be the most defensible under the Constitution, and would lock this thing up and it would take care of it. And we would have faith in our election process again, or at least in our constitutional process, to remedy fraudulent or illegal voting schemes. And that path number one is state legislators doing their job. Now, listen, I know you know that I've been saying this for 4 weeks, okay? Daniel Horowitz, Mark Levin, myself, and some others have been shouting this from the rooftops for weeks. And a lot of people said we were crazy, said that would never happen. No one would even consider that. But now we have Pennsylvania legislators calling on their legislature to do that. And granted, the leadership didn't back them up on that. And so I'm beginning to lose faith that Pennsylvania will actually do this. Too many spineless folks there. And I realize certification is a question. If that's done, can they still do this? I'll come back to that hopefully. But look, it's happening in Pennsylvania. It's happening in Michigan. It's happening in Wisconsin. It's happening in Arizona. Those states and now Georgia are beginning this process of the legislators looking at how bad was it, and if it's so bad that we can't trust the outcome, we do have the right to intervene. And we've seen the testimony. Of course, Giuliani and Jenna Ellis have said the same thing that Levin and Horowitz and I have been saying. And so that's began to finally catch steam. People have begun to understand that is a proper constitutional power given to state legislators in Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 2. It's vitally important for us to recognize that. Even if the election doesn't change, this will once again empower state legislators to reassert their authority, not just on presidential elections, but in a lot of other areas as well. So this is an important battle for us to fight. So anyway, bottom line is, number one path is the legislators do their job and take back the ability to name the electors. Now, to reiterate what I've said over the last few weeks, that's clearly laid out in Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 2. The Supreme Court has ruled in multiple cases, including this summer in the case about faithless electors, and in 2000 in the Bush v. Gore case, and in previous cases, that the legislature has this power and that they can take it back, quote, at any time. So that power is there. The problem is too many spineless, self-protecting politicians that aren't willing to take on this fight. I don't think they're likely to do it. I think Giuliani was right. I forget which state. It was either Arizona or might have been in Michigan. Anyway, when he said in the hearing, he said, you guys ought to be willing to lose your next election in order to save the Constitution. And I agree with that. I absolutely think they should. And I just don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. I think Pennsylvania's already folded, but it could change. I mean, part of what's happening is as it's finally getting out, the media is doing such a disservice. They should at least be saying, here's what these crazy people are saying about what could be done constitutionally, so that people know that these options are out there and this is being considered. And then here's what the other side says, and these guys are crazy. At least do that so that people know that this is happening and why this is happening and what the constitutional basis is for our arguments. But they're not even doing that. However, in conservative circles, if you're following the right feeds on Parler and Twitter and others, then this is at least catching steam enough so that these legislators are having hearings and saying we might do this. So that's a good sign, and that momentum may continue. And I realize deadline's coming up, safe harbor date is in just a few days. Electors actually voting is December 14th, and on and on and on. But for those who think that those dates are absolute deadlines, let me give you one example that I think helps us have some faith that they aren't. 1960, I haven't talked about this one in all these Facebook Lives, but Nixon-Kennedy. That was a super close race. In fact, tons of fraud that was proven in Chicago. Supposedly that delivered Illinois for Kennedy. And in Texas, Johnson's machine in Texas. And those two states would have flipped it back to Nixon. The popular vote was neck and neck. The electoral vote looks a little bit lopsided because of just those two states. Had those two states not been stolen, then Nixon would have won in 1960. I say all that to say in Hawaii, the electoral votes were initially given to Nixon, and it wasn't until December 28th that the recount finished in Hawaii, and it turned out that Kennedy, according to that recount, won. And so when they actually met on January 6th, sort of like when Bush-Gore, that one was so close, and the president of the Senate was the vice president, which was Gore, and he was the one having to open these ballots and see that he had lost to Bush, and he had to put down the objections that took place. Same thing happened in 1960. Nixon was vice president, so he's the one overseeing the opening of the ballots, kind of like Mike Pence is going to oversee the opening of the ballots on January 6th. Anyway, you had a situation where two sets of electors had been certified in Hawaii. And so Nixon actually was the one to say, we're not going to entertain any objections on Hawaii, because we're going to go ahead and approve the ones that came in late, not the ones that were approved on the date that the federal statute says they have to be approved, but the ones that came in late. Now, he did say when he said that, without creating precedent, if saying that actually changes anything, who knows until that's litigated. I just give you that example to say, I realize the safe harbor date's coming up. I realize December 14th is coming up, but that doesn't always mean in game. Definitely, it is closing the gap, right? I mean, it is narrowing Trump's options here. Let me come back to my big picture of what I was trying to say. Thanks for that smoke. Why am I not getting a smoke on that cigar? Why? Anyway, so 3 ways for Trump to still win. All right, number 1 is legislators do their job. Number 2 is going to be the Supreme Court does their job. And then number 3, Congress could still do their job on January 6th. Let me back up to the first one again. I wasn't finished with breaking that down for you. I think these politicians and these state legislators absolutely should do their job. But they're not likely to, even though we've got illegal voting schemes, without question, in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada. There's no doubt those are illegal voting schemes that violate Article 1, Section 4. Now, I've been talking about Article 2, Section 1, which says that the legislature decides how electors are chosen. The other constitutional clause at play here is Article 1, Section 4, that says the time, place, and manner of elections is decided by the legislature. Okay, so that's 2 different clauses we're discussing. That's the one that says they get to decide how the election is going to take place. That's the one that's been violated by all of these states that created these voting schemes without the legislature involved. So despite that, I think a lot of these legislators are not going to do their job. Despite the fact that we've got 40,000 people in Nevada that voted twice. Testimony in multiple states of ballots being run through the machine multiple times. I mean, we have testimony. That is evidence. Testimony is evidence. All the ballot dumps, all the data dumps, the widespread fraud that's already been proven in these hearings and will come out in the courts more, the statistical impossibilities when you look at this, and all the rest. Okay, most everybody here has heard all that, debated all that. We know all of that junk is out there, and despite that being there, which is plenty for a legislator to say, I can't have faith in this election, we are going to choose the electors. I still think path number 1 is closing in some of these states. It may be opening in Georgia, we'll see, but I'm not putting my faith in these legislators. So put the pressure on them. If you live in those states, tell them you need to be naming the electors. Okay, that's path number 1. Path number 2 is the Supreme Court. doing their job and upholding the Constitution and the rule of law. And I don't even think this depends on the fraud issue. This is strictly based on that Article 1, Section 4 violation that the time, place, and manner was changed by secretaries of state and governors. That is unconstitutional. It is illegal. And I think just based on that, the Supreme Court has the ability to throw out those states that did that, and that includes about 5 of these 7, states that are still questionable. So if the Supreme Court does their job and throws out those results, now we have less than 270 for Biden, less than 270 for Trump, and it goes to the House of Representatives, where 26 state delegations that are controlled by Republicans will choose Trump. So that path number 2, I think, is honestly, I think that is the most likely path for victory. I'm not saying it's likely the Supreme Court will do that. I think it's more likely that will happen than these other 2 paths will happen. And we'll see. That is yet to get to the Supreme Court and could still yet be weeks away before that happens. Okay, third path, and this is, I want to throw out a lot for you here because I think it's interesting. I think there's some cool history here and some very confusing rules. The third path is that Congress, when it meets on January 6th to actually open the ballots, okay, Mike Pence will be sitting up there at the Speaker's dais in the House chamber. The House and Senate both will be in that chamber. It'll be like a State of the Union where they come together, okay? Pence will begin to open those ballots one by one in the states. The first time it gets to a state where there are objections, and I haven't looked at the alphabet, but I'm assuming that would be Georgia, just guessing on what these 7 states are. Let me see here. We got Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin. Oh, no, Arizona would be first. Hello, that's an A. All right, so when Arizona gets called, you're going to have objections. I just think that's a foregone conclusion at this point. Here's what the Constitution says is that is not much. It just says that these 2 bodies will count the electors, and whoever gets a majority of the votes cast. And remember, we've had our discussions about that too. What is the majority going to be if some votes are thrown out? But that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about today is what's going to happen in the room. Now, the way that process plays out is actually controlled right now by federal law. So let me be clear. There's constitutional provisions in the United States Constitution, the 2 that we've talked about. Article 1, Section 4 says legislators decide how elections are going to take place. There's a comma after that part, so it's time, place, and manner is determined by the legislature, comma, but then Congress can modify those time, place, and manner laws as they see fit, which is why we have one election day, a national election day. Congress has done that. Okay, so Congress has the power to modify time, place, and manner. The other constitutional provision, Article 2, Section 1, Part 2, where the legislature chooses how electors are going to be chosen, there is no comma, Congress gets to modify that. So Congress has no say, actually, in how the electors are going to be chosen by the state legislatures. Now, that's very important for what I'm going to come to in just a moment. But both of those are constitutional provisions, all right? So there's constitutional provisions, and then there's federal law, and then there's state law, okay? There is a federal law in Title III, Section 15 and 16, that actually lays out how these counting of the electors, if there are objections, will take place. This law was passed after the 1876 debacle of an election. Now, you might remember that's the one where there was fraud all over the place. There were 3 states that sent 2 sets of electors. There was an elector in question out of Oregon. 20 electors were in question. Samuel Tilden was 1 electoral vote shy of having a majority. And so the whole thing kind of got blown up and thrown into question. They created a commission, did investigations, and ended up awarding those 20 electoral votes in question. Congress, this panel of 5 House members, 5 senators, and 5 Supreme Court justices, nothing in the Constitution creates that. That was a federal law that created that. They awarded the 20 votes to Hayes, and so Hayes ended up winning the election. Well, after that, they said, man, we need this to be more clear. So they passed a federal law, put it into that Title III, Section 15 and 16, and so here's what it basically says, okay? And I'm telling you, you need to set aside January 6th to watch this play out, because I think Congress is going to look more like the English Parliament on Saturday Night Live that day than they look like what you've ever seen on C-SPAN. it's going to be chaos. I really think it is. I think you're going to hear objection, objection over and over and over again by House members and Senate members, and Mike Pence is going to have to rule over that body when that happens, and I hope they have it planned out with some level of process so that it's not just total chaos. But I'm telling you, you want to set aside January 6th. In fact, we might just have a big watch party here at my house or something, but it's going to be a crazy day, I think. Here's how it works. Okay, Mike Pence will open up those ballots. Okay, so he'll open up the first state, and he'll go through whatever A's he's got to go through till he gets to Arizona. When he opens up Arizona, you're going to hear objection, objection. And then they're going to present that objection in writing. It has to actually be presented in writing, but I think you're going to hear him yelling out. He may already have it pre-planned. He may have the objection already handed to him right then. He's going to say, Arizona, now an objection has been filed. That objection has to be at least one House member and at least one senator. If there's at least one House member and one senator, then Mike Pence will have to say there is a joint objection to the Arizona delegates or Arizona electors. Therefore, we are recessing, and they have to break back into the House and the Senate. So the senators will leave the House chamber. They'll go over to the Senate side. The House will meet, and the Senate will meet separately. And they'll debate the Arizona electors. And they'll determine whether or not they want to accept them or reject them. Now, here's where that federal law gets really muddy, okay? And let me just caveat this by saying scholars agree. This law is incredibly difficult to discern. It is poorly written, and it could mean multiple things. So what I'm going to say right now is how I read it initially, but there are scholars that disagree with me on that as well, and some on all sides. According to this statute, if the House and Senate break up and they go debate whether Arizona's electors should be accepted, and there's some nuances on the definition of accepting it, whether it's been done in the manner prescribed by law, whether there's two sets of electors, there's lots of nuances. But according to the way some people read the statute, both chambers have to reject those electors for those electors to be rejected. Prior to this federal law, only one chamber rejecting would have not allowed those electors to be counted. So prior to this federal law that was done after the 1876 crazy election, if the U.S. Senate, controlled by Republicans, said we reject the Arizona delegation or electors, then those Arizona electors would not be counted. Okay? Some people still say that the statute under that scenario still allows for one chamber to say no, but only in these scenarios where there's two sets of electors do you have to have both chambers say no. So it's confusing, but I just want to tell you that's going to get played out, I believe, on January 6th. Because there's no way the House is going to say no, right? I mean, let's just think through that politically. Pelosi's going to have a majority. It's going to be very slim based on what has happened. And let's not forget the good news. Republicans continue to win every one of these House races. Maybe not that one in New York where they suddenly found 55 more ballots just yesterday or day before yesterday because the Republican there was ahead by 12 votes. So the Democrat might end up winning by a handful now that they've found box 13 back from 1950, whatever it was, when Lyndon Johnson did that in his Senate race. At any rate, the House is going to be a Democrat majority. But what if 4 or 5 of them decide, you know what, there was so much fraud? What if they were actually intellectually honest Democrats? Hey, you know what? There are some. In fact, let me just give a shout out right now to Tulsi Gabbard. I'm telling you, this gal in the last few days, I'm loving her tweets, right? She's actually she is cheering on President Trump in getting rid of Section 230 and saying, let's stop protecting these tech giants that are manipulating the American people. That's Tulsi Gabbard. That's a Democrat that ran for president, by the way, that absolutely decimated Kamala Harris on the debate stage. In fact, I think Tulsi Gabbard sank Kamala Harris's presidential aspirations in the actual presidential race until Joe Biden snatched her out of obscurity and brought her back. At any rate, Tulsi Gabbard, fantastic. She's also objected to this OMB appointment from President Biden. And so there are some intellectually honest, good Democrats. So what happens if 5 of them side with the Republicans in the same way that Mitt Romney sided with the Democrats on that impeachment article? It's not unheard of. Now, that also means on the Senate side, it doesn't take many senators to side with the Democrats to choose not to reject ballots. So you can imagine Mitt Romney will love that press conference when he gets to say, I'm upholding the integrity of whatever baloney he's going to bloviate with. I hate the fact that he's going to have so much power. Even if we win the 2 seats in Georgia, he's still going to be a pivotal player, which is not good for the country, but it's good for Mitt Romney. Anyway, okay, so just imagine January 6th, gets to Congress, they're opening the ballots, objection to Arizona, the 2 legislative bodies split up. They come back, the Republicans in the Senate say, we're not accepting Arizona. The Democrats in the House say, we do accept Arizona. Now there's going to be a big fight over what that statute actually says. But I'm going to throw another caveat in there. I'm sorry to give you all of these caveats, but it's just there's not solid precedent on some of these scenarios. The other caveat is, what if that federal rule, that federal law, and that statute in Title III, Section 15 and 16, is found to not be applicable to this? What if the court was to say, what if the Supreme Court was to say, the federal statute means nothing, that this is a congressional issue, I mean, this is a constitutional issue, and the part of the Constitution that says that legislators will choose how the electors are chosen does not give Congress the ability to change those rules or modify those rules. And so you have to just accept or reject, and based on the history of accepting or rejecting prior to that federal law, one chamber saying no is enough to say no, that electoral slate is not accepted. I think that's a possibility. Now, granted, small possibility, but stranger things have happened, and that very well could happen. So that's a lot of caveats, a lot of confusion maybe on how this whole process is going to play out. But again, 3 ways that this thing that still could determine the outcome of this election. State legislators, if they would do their job, these other 2 wouldn't even be necessary. If the state legislators would do their job, this would be settled. It would be constitutional. We will have saved the republic and saved the election process. But I don't know that they're going to do their jobs in enough states for that to happen. Supreme Court could still do their job and actually make sure that they uphold the rule of law and the Constitution. If they do that, they have to throw out several of these states, and that means the 12th Amendment will kick in, Section 4 of the 12th Amendment, where it says that nobody got a majority of the whole number of electors. Don't forget our caveat from that video a couple of weeks ago, where whole number of electors, is it still 270 of 538? Or did 538 change when we threw out those states? That one's up for grabs as well, because there's historical precedent of both. Most of the precedent leans towards keeping that whole number at 538, and I think that's what obviously Republicans will push for, and clearly what Democrats will push against. So that question will have to be decided. And then, of course, we'll have the knockdown, drag out January 6th. So just wanted to catch you up on all those options. Let me jump over to COVID real quick. Insanity continues. Do you realize that the Los Angeles mayor has now said that you should ban unnecessary walking? I'm sorry. I cannot believe I don't even know if we're still a Saturday Night Live skit mockery of ourselves, or if we have moved into some other realm. I mean, ban unnecessary walking. New York bar owner arrested the other night for opening his bar. Maryland, a maskless pastor answered the door to the church and was fined. The church was fined because he's there by himself, and he answers the door to the church, and this nerdy government bureaucrat looking for a chance to use their tyrannical powers fined this church over that. Now, that's in Maryland. Thank you, Larry Hogan, the biggest buffoon governor in the country, or perhaps the world, who in his press conference wears his mask to say that not requiring people to wear masks does not violate the Constitution, that you do not have a constitutional right to not wear a mask. This guy is an idiot. I'm telling you, he's got to be the worst Republican governor in the country, maybe second to Greg Abbott. Unbelievable, the things that are happening. So all I'll say is keep refusing. It's time for civil disobedience. In whatever way you can stand up and say no to this lunacy and this nonsense, please do so. And let me back that up by saying I understand COVID can kill people. It's a very small percentage of people that are susceptible to COVID actually affecting them in a very bad way, or perhaps even death. And to prove that, look, the numbers are very clear. There is not a spike in overall deaths anywhere in the world because of COVID, all right? The data does not lie. We do not have this massive increase in death rates and deaths in our country or anywhere else in the world as a result of COVID. Nobody wants to talk about that, But that alone should tell you that COVID is not what we thought it was going to be. The case positives mean nothing. Everybody keeps freaking out over the case positives. That means nothing. It's all about the death rates and the hospitalizations, and neither of those are abnormal. Neither of them. We're no busier in our hospitals than we have been in previous seasons where the flu was bad. In fact, not even really in almost, I think there's a handful, last I heard, there might be 4 hospitals in the whole country that have a higher capacity right now than they had even last year, which was a low flu season. So, I mean, the data is absolutely unquestionable. The other reason you should not let this disease, this virus, destroy your life and cause you to act any different today is that there's no asymptomatic spread. There is zero proof or science that people are spreading COVID whenever they're asymptomatic. In fact, the only science that's actually been reported on this says that there is no asymptomatic spread, that there aren't people who are sick, who have it but aren't showing symptoms and are actually spreading it. And that's based on a study of 10 million people in Wuhan. So this is nuts. And we've been locking everything down based on this theory of asymptomatic spread. So these supposed experts, and I heard today that Joe Biden's going to keep Fauci on. If Joe Biden is president, Fauci is going to be his chief medical advisor. Can you believe that? Fauci has gotten it wrong every step of the way. He's flip-flopped on this every step of the way. Masks won't help. Everybody needs a mask. I mean, this guy's a basket case, and Biden's going to name him. So there's, by the way, zero evidence that masks work. All right, we have the only massive study done on 6,000 people shows that masks don't work, that there is no statistical significance in the difference between wearing a mask or not wearing a mask for protecting yourself. That study is being hidden by everybody, but that's the Danish study. And bottom line, just use your common sense. Look at the charts. Everywhere where there are mandates, whether it's lockdowns, mask orders, whatever, the death rates and the COVID positives and everything are increasing greater than in the areas where those mandates don't exist. That's common sense. Just look at the science and the data. Or they are really, really close, which means the mandates don't make a difference. It doesn't help. So why are we shutting things down? Why are we telling healthy people to stay home? It's why we've never done that in our history. And why are we making people put a diaper on their face when it doesn't help? Live your lives. Start sanctuary cities and counties in your area. Start talking to your county commissioners and your city councils right now and say, are you tired of this yet? Have you looked at the data? Have you looked at the science? Can we make our home county or our city a safe haven? Can we make it a sanctuary city where there is no COVID fascism? There is no COVID cult. You can wear a mask if you want. You can stay home if you want. Of course, that's called freedom. But you can come out and live your life. That's called freedom. And you don't have to put a diaper on your face to do it. Last thing, everybody keep moving to Parler, Rumble, MeWe. We'll see you over there. We're still doing Twitter and Facebook because we've got some big audiences, and we want to keep serving those folks. But we're asking everybody to slowly start migrating over to these other social media platforms. We've got to shut down these tech giants, these oligarchs, these tyrants that are controlling the narrative in our country. Okay, I've rambled on long enough. I hope I've caught up on most of the stuff that's out there. Let's see, looking at your questions now. And Trey, you might have picked up on a few that you think I ought to cover.
Yes, there were a couple of really good questions.
Yeah, too many people are stuck in March, believing everyone's going to die. How do we get them to listen? No amount of logic and truth convinces them. Holly, I think you're right. I mean, it's we should have snapped out of this in April. We should have realized in April. We most certainly should have snapped out of this in early June after all of the riots and the peaceful protests across the country did not create this massive increase in death rates. That should have awakened everybody. I agree with you. Logic is not enough. Science is not enough. If we were actually going to follow the science, we would have snapped out of this a long time ago. So I think the only thing that's going to snap us out of it is massive civil disobedience. We're going to have to see more and more people, good, law-abiding citizens, unfortunately, arrested, put in cuffs, drug off to prison, over simply refusing to buy into this false narrative. So this guy in New York, the gym owners in New Jersey, the barbers, they are the heroes of the day. And we're going to need more like that. And it's going to cost people a lot of money. It's going to cost, you're going to lose your license to your business possibly. You're going to be fined. I've seen people rip up $15,000 fines. I've seen people say, I'm going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court if I have to. We're going to need more and more of that. So thank you to all of you out there that are doing that. I just think it's going to take a lot of that before the politicians either get thrown out of office. I mean, it may take that long. We may be fighting this until the next election. In some areas, they're going to keep electing these fools. In other areas, hopefully we'll have enough common sense to say, no, I watched what you did during the COVID cult crackdown. I saw that you ignored science and you ignored the people. I saw that you took the opportunity to be a tyrannical leader instead of a tyrannical power-grabbing politician rather than an actual patriot leader. And we're going to have to hold them to account, folks. Do not let them say, yeah, but we were all scared. Okay, hey, if you had reversed course in April or May or June or July or August, they've had plenty of chances to right their wrongs. And the ones that did right their wrongs, like Ron DeSantis in Florida, those are the guys and gals that we need to be saying, hey, way to go. You're a hero. That's the example. We need more like it. Okay. Yeah, Pritzker is definitely a tyrant. No doubt about it. Democrat legislature won't rein him in. Republican legislators are not doing a very good job of reining him in. There's exceptions. Idaho tried to rein in their governor. Ohio did a good job of trying to rein in their governor. And, it's a difficult process here. I still say that the courts have failed us. This was their chance to protect the Constitution and protect our rights, and they kicked the can down the road. Only a handful of judges across the country had the courage and the backbone to uphold the Constitution over the fearmongers. And the Supreme Court's been unwilling to do it so far until this order last week that slapped down Cuomo. He's the worst dictator in the entire country. So at least they slapped him down. We'll see if they'll slap down these other governors. There's several cases coming to the Supreme Court soon that will go further than the one in New York did. That one was really based on disparity. It was based on treating churches different from secular groups. But at some point, the main question is, does government have a compelling interest to control our lives when there's a virus that is killing about 1/10 to 0.2%? And I think the answer to that should be no. Otherwise, every year that there's a bad influenza strain, they can do the same thing to us that they've done with this one. Go ahead, bud. What you got for me?
What's your opinion on Barr's statements? If you've read them.
Good question. In response to somebody asking about the Constitution Coach, if you go to constitutioncoach.com, you can sign up for our weekly class and join us on Monday nights. You can also become a coach yourself, and that's the long term, what it's going to take. We're going to need several million people to go through these Constitution classes before we save the country. You get to be a part of that. Be a force multiplier. Constitutioncoach.com is the place to sign up. I think Barr's statements were premature. I respect him a lot. I think he's been a great attorney general for the most part. There's no perfect politician, folks. Nobody's going to get it right every time. I personally think he should have said, we're investigating and we haven't found enough yet to overturn the election, but we got a long way to go in our investigation. And frankly, I want to know how much investigating they've actually done. So I think, look, the media is always going to take our comments out of context. And so I think they knew, they could take that statement from Barr and slap the Trump campaign and President Trump with it. I don't think it was the best statement he's ever made. I think he should have had some caveats in that statement that would have been truthful. But frankly, I think the FBI's been negligent in this. They should have intervened a long time ago. They're frankly, they failed us. There's no doubt about it. So I think Attorney General Barr could have done better. Do I think that he's, part of the conspiracy and against? No, I don't believe that. But I do think that he could have done better in this case. Look, folks, most people in Washington, D.C. see the Trump campaign as a sinking ship right now, so they're bailing. They're like rats scurrying off and bailing off the ship. I don't think Barr is one of those, but I do think he's measured in his response. But there's a ton of others that are bailing. I've said all along, this is not about Trump winning or Biden winning. This is about upholding the Constitution, upholding the rule of law, giving us a little bit of faith in our elections for the future. And I do think there's some dams breaking. I think this Georgia stuff is so over the top, that has to give people pause. I think the Arizona testimony should have given people pause. I think Doug Ducey failed us by certifying that slate in Arizona, because it could come down to that statute I was telling you about on January 6th. It's very possible one of the scenarios in the reading of that statute is that if the House and Senate come back and disagree, that they default to what did the governor in that state do. And so there could be a chance that those 11 electors would have gone to Trump except for the fact that Ducey certified. Now, he may have felt like he didn't have a choice. I wasn't in his shoes. I've met Ducey on many occasions. He's been a supporter of Patriot Academy. He's spoken to our Patriot Academy many times. He's been a great governor on many issues. I think he's been awful on COVID. I think he's been as bad as Abbott on COVID. So I think he's totally missed the mark on COVID. And I think he missed the mark on certifying the election when I don't think he had to. But again, I'm not in his shoes. No politician is perfect. One thing I agree with Mark Meckler on an awful lot. In fact, most things. And we both say, look, we don't exalt any politician. We're not going to be friends with a politician no matter what they do. We're going to gauge our politicians based on what they've done in the last 10 minutes. And that may not sound fair to some of you guys, but look, that's our job as citizens, is to hold them accountable. And you may have helped us out with a lot of stuff. Greg Abbott was great on Convention of States. He helped us get that through in Texas. But he has been so abysmally terrible on COVID that I'm never going to get over that. I'm sorry. I will never support the man for anything ever again. And now if he's the only Republican running and we tried to defeat him in a primary and now I got to choose between him and a Hillary Clinton, that's a different animal. But I'll never support him in a Republican primary or throw my weight behind him again because of how bad he was on the COVID crackdowns. Okay, I got off on a tangent there.
Number one, what's your Parler handle?
Parler handle is Constitution Coach. So if you go to Parler and search Constitution Coach, or you just go to @Constitution Coach, you'll find me there. And I'm trying to do better, guys. Our whole team is working on trying to post more on those news sites. My habit is Twitter and Facebook. And Twitter's been new for me this year. I've been off Twitter for a long time and just started using Twitter again this summer. So anyway, Constitution Coach, that's where you want to go.
Do you want to speak to civilly disobeying the mask mandates in terms of where you go and showing other people courage in terms of not wearing, and how oftentimes nobody says anything?
Yeah, so Trey's point is that, your civil disobedience with regard to the mask mandates is going to help encourage other people. I know it's going to scare some people. I am not one of these people that says, if you love your neighbor, you'll wear the mask just because it makes them feel better. That's kind of like saying, if you love your neighbor and they decide they're a transgender, that you should just support them in whatever they do. In my opinion, you don't love your neighbor based on a lie. I think that's never good. I think anytime you take the easy road that makes your neighbor feel good and you call that loving them, you're ignoring an awful lot of Scripture. I mean, Jesus, the apostles, an awful lot of other characters in the Bible, man, they said a lot of things that didn't make their neighbor feel good. In fact, most of the things that they said didn't make their neighbor feel good. It gave conviction, it taught truth, and it woke up the neighbor to realize, I've been living a lie. I think that's part of what we have to do with this mask mandate is I go everywhere without the mask in order to show people that you can be healthy and go everywhere without a mask, that you do not need to wear a mask everywhere. I frankly think the people that continue to wear a mask everywhere, and I'm watching people still walking to their car by themselves outside, still with the mask on, allowing it to just become a habit. Driving with their mask. I mean, I think we're being fools. I'm sorry. You're being a fool if you wear the mask all the time, everywhere. And in fact, you're being unhealthy. It is not healthy to have that mask on all the time, to decrease your breathing like that, to have the bacteria that builds up in the moisture of the mask. I mean, we've already got doctor after doctor after doctor warning us that this is making things worse. The lockdowns, all of this stuff. I mean, the suicide rates, folks, you got to start paying attention to the opportunity cost here, the cost-benefit analysis. The cost of the reaction to this COVID crisis is enormous. It's enormous financially. It's enormous in terms of lives lost. And I have not researched this, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw just on Twitter last night an 11-year-old committed suicide in the middle of their Zoom class for school yesterday. Somebody tell me if that's wrong, if that's a lie. I didn't go read the article. If that is true, gosh, that should shake us. That should cause us to realize we are damaging our children right now. And I think the masks have a lot to do with that. I think seeing everyone with masks on is not healthy for us. Our human nature wants to interact, let alone all the crime that's being committed right now with all these people wearing masks, walking right up to the cameras with their mask on because they know it's going to make it harder for them to be able to find. It's just idiocy. And so I think the more of us that go without the mask right now, the sooner we're going to get out of this COVID fog that everybody is in. Now, all of that, I must also say, if you're going into someone's private business, that is their private property. That is not a place to throw a fit. My tendency is to throw a fit, I'll be honest. I mean, if I go in and they want me to wear a mask from the hostess desk station to the table, 99% of the time I say, forget it, I'll go somewhere else and eat, okay? I did take my daughter out for her birthday. It was a super nice restaurant. We had gotten our reservations well in advance. She really wanted to eat there, and they were adamant that I was going to have to wear a mask. So I compromised a little bit. I did not wear the mask, but I held it up close to my face in order to walk. Is that not the stupidest thing? Can you imagine that we have to do that? Anyway, so you got to decide in those individual scenarios. For me, I'm just not going to do it 99% of the time. I have to wear it on the plane the few times that I fly. I don't wear it in the airport. I don't wear it until I'm about to get on the plane. That's me. You decide what you're going to do. Most of these business owners, most of them that I've interacted with, they don't want to do this. They're doing it because they're scared of the government. I mean, I've literally had a business owner say, please just hold the mask in your hand in case they show up. I mean, that is so sad. I mean, he's looking at the door and he's afraid of our own government right now. I get righteously angry, folks. This is tyranny. It's absolutely tyranny, and it's got to stop. So for me, civil disobedience is required at this point. I'm asking the churches, open up. You're doing a disservice to your people if you're not open yet. And you don't do all of the goofy stuff. You don't require a mask. Don't require social distancing. Have an area in the back of the auditorium if people want to social distance where they want to be. I love, one of my favorite pastors in the country is Tim Brooks, pastor in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Just an amazing guy. Great, in-depth. His teaching is so good, so good. One of the ones to watch online if you haven't been able to find a church close to you to go to. But, Tim opened his church pretty quick after this and said, if you want to wear a mask, you can wear a mask, but we're not requiring it, and we're not requiring social distancing, and just good common sense. And, man, there's been a lot of people that have lambasted him over that. There's been a lot of people that have come to his church and started going to his church because of that. And I think we've seen a lot of churches flourish because they opened and didn't require all these things. And thank you, Rob McCoy. Oh, announcement for everybody that would like to join us. We had to change our date. We're not going to be at Rob McCoy's church on the 12th of December. We're going to be there the 16th. So if you want to be a part of the filming, if you want to be on camera with us, we're filming the new parts to Constitutional Live. The new version of Constitutional Live being released after the first of the year is called Biblical Citizenship in Modern America. And so we're creating new intros to all the class segments. Kirk Cameron's going to be there speaking that night, doing his part on the Pilgrim's Monument. Tim Barton's going to be doing an amazing new section for the class. Rob McCoy's going to be with us. We're going to have some of our coaches on the panel with us. It's going to be a really fun night. So December 16th, the evening of December 16th, block that off. If you're in the Los Angeles area or anywhere close and you want to drive in for that night, we would love to have you. We're going to pack that church out. It's going to be phenomenal. Hey, we may all get arrested if Gavin Newsom finds out we're planning this, but we'll have a great time. And that'll become part of the class as our arrest videos. No, I think we're going to be good. But anyway, December 16th, if you want to join us for that, Thousand Oaks, California is where we'll be filming. And we'll be filming that night from about 6 to 9, maybe 5 to 9. Anyway, watch on my Facebook page. We'll announce it and invite you there. What else, buddy?
A couple questions on employers having certain requirements, like taking the vaccine when it comes out. Any advice on how to respond to that?
Yeah, if your employer is going to require you to get the vaccine, I think we'll end up with some lawsuits over this, and whether or not that's going to be discrimination is going to be determined. A lot of this is going to. I can tell you that I think that's unconstitutional. I can tell you that there's case law and constitutional precedent for all this stuff. But we live in a new age right now where people are more afraid of COVID than they care about their liberty and their freedom. And so I can tell you that if you're going to refuse the vaccine or refuse to wear a mask or whatever, you're going to have an uphill battle that I encourage you to fight. I want you to take that hill. We need people to take that hill. But you very well may lose your job. and you very well may need to start looking for another place to live. I mean, I'm not saying that lightly, folks. I'm just telling you.
No, we're good.
Okay. You might need to start looking for another place to live. And I wish I could say Texas is the place, but our governor's been as bad as any other. I think we're going to reverse that in Texas. I pray we're going to reverse that.
Yeah.
Keep going. That's what.
We're going? Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So keep, keep thinking like you're thinking. If you choose not to get the vaccine, which, look, I'm telling everybody that's up to you. If you're a person that got all the vaccines and did all the vaccines for your kids, COVID's probably going to be safe for you, and you probably ought to do it. If you're vulnerable, maybe you should do it. I'm not going to do it for the same reason that I don't do a bunch of the other vaccines. If you have a slim chance of getting the disease, or in this case the virus, or having a negative effect from the virus, there's no reason to get the vaccine. I personally would rather have the immunity from getting the virus than the immunity from the vaccine, because they may not report it, but if you dig deep enough into the data, I can say with a 90% certainty that based on the history of vaccines and on viruses and that sort of thing, you're probably going to have a much stronger immunity from having the virus than from the vaccine. Now, we'll see as this thing plays out and they do more of their testing and right now it's all based on limited testing, limited studies because of rushing this thing to the market. And I don't say that, I personally have always hesitated to do any vaccines for our kids, and so I do worry a little bit about how fast this thing was rushed, but I don't say that to scare you. If they prove that it's safe for most people, then, it's up to you. But for me, I always do a cost-benefit analysis. And the cost or the risk of taking the vaccine does not outweigh the benefit. In fact, there is no benefit to the vaccine for me. As a healthy person that prefers to get the virus and have the immunity from the actual virus, I don't see a benefit to the vaccine. But the world around us, oh my goodness, I may not be able to fly for the next 10 years if that's going to be my position. I mean, that's just what's probably coming down. And so then I'm going to have to make some hard decisions about it. Then my cost-benefit analysis may change. I don't think it will. At this point, I'm not getting the vaccine for the reasons I just stated, and I'm going to deal with whatever the cost is for doing that. But I'm going to constantly reevaluate, and I encourage you to do the same thing, and you're going to have to do that if your employer says you can't work here without it. So everybody's going to have to make some tough decisions.
Any specific responses or keywords, things that you would have people say to their church if they're having these crazy requirements to come in?
Yeah, if your church is requiring, the social distancing and you have to have a mask on and all that, I mean, I would write a nice letter to the pastor, or try to walk up to the pastor and talk to him without your mask on and see what happens. I would communicate with the pastor and say, look, the data, the science doesn't back this up, and you may be doing it just to make people feel good, but I don't think we should just make people feel good. I think we should teach truth, and we should live truth. And, this is serious enough to me, based on the fact that it's destroying our society, that I think the church should lead on this, not follow. And if you're not willing to do that, I'm going to have to find somewhere else to worship, and then find somewhere else to worship. That's what I would do. Now, doesn't mean you have to do that, obviously. You do what you think is best and pray about it and see what your options are in your community and in your neighborhood. So, okay, so let me say this before I close out, unless you've got any more. If you got any more, I'll come back to them. How's that?
Just quick comment on keywords for your employer that they're going to require this. For example, religious exemption, conscious. What are some things you would say?
I would start with the fact that this vaccine should not be treated any different than other vaccines. And if you live in a state, which I think it's 42 or 3, that has a conscientious or religious exemption to vaccines, then start there and say, look, I don't do Hep B vaccine because the chances of me getting it are way less than the dangers of the vaccine itself. And so I choose not to do that one, and so you can't require me to get that one to come to work. I would start there. But I tell you what, if you guys will give me some time, I will try to do more homework on this one and talk to some folks that are really ready for this legal battle or getting ready for this legal battle, and maybe even have a guest on to talk about that. Because that fight is definitely coming, and it's here faster than I thought. Thank you, Donald Trump. I mean, and I don't mean that facetiously. I mean, I think the Operation Warp Speed was a success, and people should give him credit. Again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think vaccines have been a phenomenal invention and have saved a lot of lives. I'm just rational about which vaccines to get based on the danger presented by a particular virus or disease. So I would say, tell your employer, say, listen, I'm going to really research this and make an informed decision. And it's possible that I will have a religious or conscientious objection to getting the vaccine. Does that mean I can't work here? If I am living out my rights under the law, are you going to fire me? And go ahead and find out what your position, your employer's position is going to be, and then you'll know whether or not it is a hill on which to die. Or in this case, try not to die. So, okay. Hey, listen, we're 5 hours late leaving for Georgia. Okay, so we're gonna have to drive all night to get to our first event in Dalton, Georgia tomorrow night. The reason, and I want to go back to what I started with tonight. Remember, I said there are 3 paths where the presidency hangs in the balance. The first path is that state legislators need to do their job, exercise their power under Article 2, Section 1, Part 2, and actually choose the electors themselves. That may happen in the next few days, but it's starting to look less likely. Path 2 is the Supreme Court throws out some of these states based on the fact that they violated the law. Not even based on the fraud, which they may do it based on the fraud, but that's not where my hope lies. My hope lies in the fact that they clearly, black and white, broke the law, violated the Constitution, and the results of their elections could get tossed by the Supreme Court, and nobody may end up with a majority. Path 3 is that Congress actually throws out some of these electoral slates on January 6th. So let me paint that picture a little bit more detailed. Now, remember what I said earlier. Picture it. Mike Pence is up there at the dais. The Senate and the House is present. The House has a very small majority Democrats. The Senate has a very small majority, we don't know who, because of the runoffs in Georgia. So the Senate on January 6th, remember this is after January 3rd. January 3rd is when the new Senate and the new House is seated. So on January 6th, it could be that there are 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats, and the Georgia runoff that happened the day before has not yet been certified. Those senators have not been seated. So if in Georgia, let's look at the multiple possibilities here, okay? If the Democrats win the elections in the runoff in Georgia, which God forbid they don't, right? Because first of all, they are radical, socialist, communist Democrats running in Georgia. If they win, AOC is going to have her counterparts over on the other side of the chamber. One of these guys is, if you remember when Barack Obama ran, his pastor was Jeremiah Wright. This guy was anti-American, pro-communist, awful. That's the kind of guy that's running in Georgia. So, but let's say the Democrats win. Well, on January 6th, if they won on the evening of January 5th, are they going to be sworn in time? I think it's at 1 o'clock, according to the federal statute. It'll be at 1 o'clock on January 6th that the chambers meet. So will the election be certified, and will those senators be seated? I think there's a high probability that they won't be, because if this thing is close and everybody's demanding recounts and there's lawsuits, there's a good chance we won't know who won those Senate seats for a couple of more days, which means the Senate will remain 50 to 48. The Senate is 52-48, right? Well, no, I'm sorry. That Arizona seat flipped, and that one got sworn in yesterday, right? Or day before yesterday. Thank you, Doug Ducey. You could have held off for that very reason. But anyway, so right now the Senate is it 51-49? Or is it 52-48 right now? I think with that Arizona flip, it's 50... No, I think that made it 52-48. I'm sorry, I should know this. I've been looking at these things, but too many numbers. I think it's 52-48 with that flip in Arizona. So that makes it actually 50-48 without the Georgia seats, if those aren't nobody seated. Because on January 3rd, Purdue and Loeffler are no longer U.S. senators unless they win that election on January 5th. All right, that is clear in the 20th Amendment that their term ends on January 3rd. So imagine that the House and the Senate on January 6th split up to debate and object over votes. Well, then clearly on the Senate side, you've got a 50 to 48 majority of Republicans. Mitt Romney could flip on some of those, and now it's 49 to 49. And then Mike Pence would break the tie. Mitt Romney and Suzanne Collins or Mitt Romney and Murkowski could flip on some of those objections, and then there's no tie. They side with the Democrats. So there's some crazy scenarios that could play out, regardless of who wins the Senate seats in Georgia. Now, if the Republicans win on January 5th, and if somehow it's such a big landslide, they rush on the morning of the 6th, they certify the results, and they're able to be sworn in and be seated, then you've got a 52-48 majority, and it's much more. There's a little bit more of a cushion there to deal with. So, guys, it's just going to be crazy. That's all I can say. But the reason I'm going to Georgia, the reason I'm going to turn this off and literally go get in the RV and we're taking off to drive as fast as we can to get to Georgia for these events all weekend long, is not for the craziness of January 6th. Partially for that, okay, I would love for them to win and be seated and help us with that. It's for the next 2 years and 4 years. Georgia is the Alamo, all right? If Joe Biden becomes president and Nancy Pelosi remains speaker, the Senate is our only chance to stop the damage that will occur over the next 2 years. Now, can we come back from the damage? Yes. But the damage is going to hurt, folks. It's going to be bad. If they control all three, they're going to ram things down our throat. They know that when they do that, it's going to cost them in 2022. We're going to take the House in 2022 either way. So they know they've got to do it now. And just like with Obamacare, they rammed it through. It cost them dearly in the elections. But look, it's still there, right? We still haven't gotten rid of Obamacare, and they knew that would happen. So we've got to hold the Senate. We need to win these elections in Georgia. Tell all of your friends and family in Georgia to show up and vote. Vote for the two Republicans. Keep Purdue and Loeffler. No matter what you think of them, no matter what bad votes they've had, they are light years ahead better than the Democrats. And more importantly, it's important to have the majority in the Senate to be able to stop the damage, or at least mitigate the damage, of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Nancy Pelosi. All right, so tell your friends and family. If you want to join us, if you're in Georgia, go to barnstormgeorgia.com. It has all of the events that we're doing. We'd love for you to come out and join us at any of those events. And please share that link, barnstormgeorgia.com. Let me just type that in here real quick. www.barnstormgeorgia.com. Share that link with everybody you know in Georgia and get them to those events. All right? God bless you guys. Wish I had more time to visit tonight because the fire feels good and there's a lot to talk about. But we're out of time and we got to get to Georgia. All right? God bless you guys. By the way, give us some feedback on if you like this setup. Was the camera feed good? Did you like the camera and the microphone? Was it stronger than what we normally have? We're using some new equipment that we might start using in our Front Porch Lives, but that we're definitely using for our live streams from Georgia. And so we'd love to get your feedback on that and how it all turned out.